Anybody hear me out there? I'm awfully sorry about the delay in starting here. I had to revert back to the old YouTube studio. Anybody hear me out there? I'm awfully sorry about the delay in starting here. I had to revert back to the old YouTube studio. I'm awfully sorry about the delay in starting here. I had to revert back. Beautiful. Okay, just getting rid of the delays here so I can hear you right. And why don't I get an image on the screen? All right, beautiful. Give me half a second more here. I'm a bit thrown by the technical problems, but I should be able to get going pretty quick. All right, I want to introduce myself, and thanks for wading through the glitchiness there. My name is Jason. First and foremost, I consider myself a gardener, which is what brought me into all of this. And I never really considered myself a professional grower. However, that has happened, and so I'm a professional grower now of wholesale perennials for about 10 years now. And this video here is to indicate how I got there. I also have a small farm where I grow lots of roses, 200 varieties, plus a bunch of other plants that I enjoy. And that's the main topic of all my other videos. So here I'm really talking about my professional life, my job growing perennials. So I'm going to introduce the main topics of what I'll be talking about here. I'll put up a little outline. There we go. And the first thing I'm doing is introducing myself and the topic. The second thing I'm going to do is talk about why I left my career in retail. The third thing I'm going to talk about is how I got to growing plants professionally, and then I'll be giving you an update. It's 10 years since I've made the transition, so I want to tell you how it's going for me, and then we'll spare some time for questions and discussion. And obviously, if you have any questions anytime throughout, go ahead and throw those on the side of the screen. I'll try to answer them as we go. All right, so the first section I talked about is how I left retail, or why I left retail, and I guess I could simplify this down to the platitude of it didn't suit me, and that would be equally true, but it would leave some questions unanswered, like why did it take me 20 years to decide that? So I spent about 20 years working in retail. I worked in retail for a bunch of different retailers. The first one was Consumers Distributing, which is a Canadian retailer that none of you would probably recognize. A bit of an oddball catalog retailer showroom. I think they have something in the States called Service Merchandise, which is fairly similar. Then I worked for Value Village, which is a thrift store. If anybody was from Australia, they would recognize it as Savers. I worked for PetSmart, who unfortunately gets the worst of it in this video, and I hate to be all dishy, but that was the retailer that's kind of convinced me that I don't want to be doing this anymore. And then finally, I worked for Staples. So I should first of all say that I got into retail the way a lot of young people get into retail. It was sort of like the path of least resistance. I was enrolling for college out of high school, and retail was just something very easy to get into, easy to get that first job. And I want to describe what I call the retail trap, which is that when you're young and you don't know exactly what you want to be doing, it can be easy to get there, and they start offering you encouragement. They start offering you raises. They start offering you promises of advancement. And when you're young and you don't know what it is you want to do in the world, that can be very enticing. Sorry, just closing off another monitor there so I don't get distracted. I was conscientious. I caught on quite quickly. And so, yeah, they offered me stuff and I stuck around. And I kind of dawdled in college for a little while, but at the time I didn't know that I was as interested in gardening or horticulture as I am, and so it took me a while to get there. And here's what I'll say is that early on for me, it was very easy to buy in. It was easy to buy in for those promises. It was easy to buy in for the promises that they would make me. It was also easy to buy in for the hype that they offered in the business. So if you've ever watched that television show Superstore, that's about the retail business. So that's like sort of a parody of Walmart or that kind of thing. And boy, does it hit home for me. Sort of corporate culture, the morning rally meetings where everybody gets excited. They'll come up with a new training program and everybody will get hyped up about it. In fact, the thing for me, my first bits of hype, I could really get into. So when I worked for Consumers Distributing, they had this hype program where we became obsessed with customer service, and there was a big program out, and they even brought in the celebration. They would have the store filled up with balloons, which nothing says something is exciting more than having balloons around the store and a little celebration, and everybody got all hyped about this, and I bought into it very easily. There I became obsessed with customer service. When I was working for Value Village, I joined the Great Adventure. Later on, I became really good at promoting extended warranties for customers and selling electronics and so on. So yeah, it was something that I could do, and that was what I was selling them. I was selling them my ability to buy into their hype. And I can use the term suspending disbelief because that was the act I was going on in my brain there, is I'm kind of going, well, I know that they're not really, legit about this or emotionally legit, but it's the plot of the story. So it's a bit like watching a superhero movie, and you go there, people don't have superpowers, but because that's the plot of the movie, you can buy into it. And it's only when like the super genius supervillain does something like totally stupid, comes up with a dumb plan to wipe out half the sentient life in the universe, that you just go, oh my God, I can't watch this anymore. And so for a long time, I was able to buy in to the hype that they gave me, and then later on, I became unable to do so. And the point that hit for me was about 12 years in. So I was working at PetSmart, and I should be fair to PetSmart. I don't want to dish on them too badly. They were just the employer I had when I ran out of steam on that. And they also had, at the time, at least locally, a particularly vicious corporate culture, which I dealt with before, but in this case, I wasn't able to deal with it. They paid me well. My store was making a good profit. The stock options were really nice, so I was making good money, but I was having a hard time buying it. At one point, they brought us down to Phoenix, Arizona for a manager's retreat, and the theme was, people are the heart of our company. And they emphasized this point by having these little handout plastic beating hearts that they would send us back to the store with to emphasize the point. And, so we go there, we have the rally, there were more balloons, and then we come back to the store, and, almost I think the very next email I got was something from corporate telling us that we had to cut back hours of our staff because they wanted to post a really big quarterly result in the financials. And I was like, damn, like they couldn't even let me buy the plot for a couple of days in the store. So much for people being the heart of the company, and that little plastic toy went straight in the trash bin. So that was my source of disillusionment. I was able to see through the lies too quickly, or not convince myself to just buy the plot. My final manager retreat with PetSmart was another fun one. They had a big announcement to make. And they told us this in advance. They have a big announcement to make. So we went into this big hall, and they had, again, the balloons waiting in the wings. I think there might have even been streamers, a song to sing or something like that. And the president came out and he announced the big news, which was, we're changing the name of our company. We're changing it from PetSmart to PetSmart. And I paused and the crowd went nuts. Like everybody bought in, like, oh yeah, we're changing the name of our company from PetSmart to PetSmart. And if you're catching the little linguistic thing there, they made the S in the middle a capital S. So, to indicate that the company was smart about pets rather than just a mart that sold pet stuff. And literally, they went out to 600 different stores or more and changed all the signage, all the little signage around in the front of the store, on all the signage, on all the brochures, on all the registers. They literally re-stickered the whole company on that big initiative. And I was having a hard time buying into the usefulness of these dumb linguistic exercises. In fact, I guess what I would say is I was getting a bit disillusioned around the thing of how surface level the retail business is. You think of these spaces that they rent, they lease, they get these storefront spaces, which basically they slap up a coat of paint, chosen in the corporate colors. They throw on a few signs on the windows. They get new registers. They put their merchandise in it. They put their stuff in there. But all this stuff is bought on consignment, basically, or on terms. So basically, the hope is to sell it before you own it. And then they would hire a bunch of short-term temporary staff members who, except for a different color of polo shirt, could be working in the store right next door because there's no training and nobody sticks around for all that long. So it's basically this illusion that you have a big solid company there that's doing something important or useful. And, no offense to people who work retail. I mean, this was just my experience of it. I was starting to get to the point where they didn't build something, they didn't grow something, they didn't create anything. As far as I was concerned, if I was selling the thing and they came to my retail store and bought the thing, or if they went to the next retail store and bought the thing, it really didn't make a difference in the world. It was just a matter of who got to put the profit in their pocket. And it didn't make a lot of difference how good I was at it, and so basically the only thing I was selling them was my buy-in, and I was having a hard time with that. So right around that time, like I say, PetSmart had a little turn of negative corporate culture, at least locally, and they to manifest that, they put a new district manager in place. And I'm going to dish on a particular person. You won't be able to identify him, so I think I'm okay. Let's just call him Darren, because that was his name. And Darren became the district manager of my district. And early on, I knew his reputation. I'd met him a few times. A bit of a jerk, but that's the kind of guy they were going for at the time. And one of his first acts as district manager was he did something that I couldn't understand. He took my assistant manager, so I was the store manager, or store director, I guess they called it. So that made the guy they transferred my assistant director, which sounds a lot more cinematic than it is. So they took my assistant director and they moved him to a further away store. And they transferred in a new assistant director, which made no sense to me because we were working well together. We were getting lots of profit in the stores. Things were functioning well. So he put this lady in my store, and she had a reputation as not being a very good manager. So I'm like, great, I got plunked in a transfer. But that had been done before, so that's no big deal. And I started working with her and trying to get her up to speed in our store. Then I got the district manager visit, to tell me what the transfer was really about. So this Darren took me out behind the store, which, by the way, is never a very promising start for a meeting, and told me, not even in a veiled way, that he wanted her fired. He wanted her gone. And the other manager who was in the other store was too close to her, and he wasn't going to fire her. So he wanted me to do it. And he told me that if I wasn't willing to fire her, that he would fire me. And mind you, in my own head, I'm going, I have a young child at home. So my first daughter, Brooklyn, had just been born, or was a couple years old, sorry. And my wife was just with child with my younger daughter, Emily. So this was not the right time, really, for me to be thinking that I'm going to go look for a new job. But on the other hand, I have to say, I wasn't down with the plan of firing this lady. And, here's the thing. She didn't have a great reputation as a worker. And yeah, she was having a hard time keeping up to my standards initially. But she was trying. And I felt like not only was this ethically the wrong thing to do, to take a person who was working hard and trying for you and unfairly target her for dismissal. But also I felt that it was the wrong business move. Ultimately would lead to legal challenge, and it just wasn't the right thing to do for the stores. So that's when I knew I had to leave. So that concludes my first section here, which is to talk about why I left the retail business. And I'm going to, actually go to the comments here just for a second, because I just want to see if there's any questions so far. Yeah, Rutger, absolutely. It's what they're aiming for. Naive young people willing to, sell their soul for some time. And, at first I was absolutely willing to do so. And, I didn't even see the problem with it. I was kind of aimless. But in the end, people change over time. So it took me, as I say, that 12 or 15 years to get myself in a spot where I could see through it and eventually decide to do something else. So I'm going to move on to the section now about how I left retail. And picking up where I left off, I knew that Darren was a very small man. I'd been to other district meetings with him before, and he had talked rather cruelly about managers who he had fired before. I don't like to say anything bad about a person, like say that anybody's a really wholly bad person in the world. From what I know about Darren, he keeps a nice garden, which, puts him in good stead in my book, and that he loves his children. So at least in that, I can say some nice things about him. But as a district manager, he was a prick. So I knew he'd be gunning for me, and I wanted to act quickly, because the truth is, if you're looking for a new job, it's much easier to do that from a position where you already have the old job. That raises fewer questions in the interview process of, oh, why did you leave your last place? And I can say, well, I'm in a bit of a pickle with my district manager, or I'm not liking the way things are going. That's a little more acceptable than me saying, well, eventually they fired me. That's harder to get past. At the same time, I saw a posting, a listing for a company called Van Bell Nursery, and Van Bell is a hang on, I'm just bringing up a graphic I'm going to show in a second here. But Van Bell is a wholesale nursery in Abbotsford. That's where I live. It was about 10 minutes from my house. They sold shrubs and young plants and big business. And I looked at that and thought, wow, it's the first time I've considered seriously that I would like to change careers into horticulture. I've been a gardener for ages. That was my first affinity for plants, was as a gardener. It's still how I identify myself. And I thought, well, maybe I'll throw my hat in the ring for this job, not with a lot of hope that I could get it. Well, strangely enough, the owner of the company actually gave me a call, and we set up an interview, and I came down and I talked to him for a while. And I think I came under some fairly serious consideration just based on my management credentials, because I'd been managing various businesses for some time, and so they eventually decided not to hire me. And they didn't explain it verbatim, but I could imagine that the reason was that I had no horticulture experience, like industry experience, and I had no horticulture education. And so it would be a hard sell to take me and put me into a position as a head grower or a grower for that company. And I ran into somebody who worked for them later on when I was working at a different place, and she confided in me. She said, Jason, they would have eaten you alive. So probably it was the right decision to make at the time, but it left a deep dissatisfaction in me somewhere. I eventually took a job at Staples, selling office supplies and computers and calculators and iPods at the time. But I felt this thing of like, oh, man, that would have been nice, like something that would be a little more fulfilling. I'd be growing something. My skill would mean something, the craftsmanship, the idea that I could put something into it and make a difference. So I put that on a slight pause, and I did want to show you this graphic of Van Bell because it's amusing. If you get a chance after this, hopefully not right now, go to YouTube and look up Van Bell Nursery. I think there's a space between Van and Bell. and look up their music video from last Christmas. It is amusing, not least of which because I know some of these people who are dancing around and singing. It's actually nicely done, nice singing. I think for some people who take religious offense, they would wonder why you stuck your company name into Hallelujah. I would be more offended along the lines of, I'm sure Leonard Cohen wouldn't approve. So anyway, that's kind of funny. All right. So I took my job at Staples and immediately began plotting my escape. And let me say this straight up, is that Staples was actually a really good employer compared to PetSmart, which was, as I say, going through an ugly turn of culture and being quite brutal to people. Staples was much kinder, much better as an employer. Side note, just a slight side note, is that I checked back in, I kept in touch with some of the people at PetSmart, and my man Darren, plus all of his little cohorts, eventually all got axed by the company too. So I guess when you live by the sword, you die by the sword, or something like that. So what I did to plot my escape from retail for good was I enrolled at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. Kwantlen has a campus in Langley, so that's only about 30 minutes away from where I live. That's the new greenhouse building there that I've just put up. They were in an older greenhouse at the time, but it was still quite a nice learning environment. And I enrolled there in the horticulture production program. So there were 3 choices when you go to school. And here's where I'm going to talk about some of the questions that I intended to make in this video. Is if you're deciding how to get out of your job and you're looking at horticulture, what are your options? And there's lots of options. In that particular school, one of the options was greenhouse program, which I signed up for. One of the second options was the turf program, which is people who do turf maintenance in golf courses primarily, but also recreationally, like fields and that kind of thing. And the third one was landscape. And I considered all 3 of those options, and there are lots of other options. If you get a degree or diploma in horticulture, you could even go work for the government in the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, or USDA, I guess it would be in the States. So there's lots and lots of options out there, but the one I chose was the greenhouse program because compared to the landscape program, which is the other one I considered, I felt like in the landscape program, there would probably be more of a chance that I would have to start my own business to get started. Whereas in the greenhouse program, there was some chance that there was an employer who could give me benefits, who could give me at least a decent starting pay, something that would tide my family along during the time while I made this transition. So I took the courses at Kwantlen mostly on weekdays, so that meant I had to pick up a bunch of weekend shifts from the other managers at the retail store, which they didn't seem to have any problem with. So I guess one other question I wanted to address at this point is, why did I go to school? Why didn't I just keep on applying for jobs within the industry? And the calculation went a bit like this. If you're trying to get into horticulture and you take the education, there's some chance that they'll start you in a supervisory role or something like that, somewhere on the growing team or somewhere as a supervisor. And that sort of gets you past that first hump of the industry. Because going in on the ground level, if you're going in just as a nursery worker, somebody who either loads plants or waters plants or cleans plants, does just basic crop work, that's a hard boundary to get past. It's hard to distinguish yourself in that capacity because hard work is expected from everyone and they don't know what else you could contribute. But if you've gone to school, my thought was at least you could walk in a half step above that, was my thought. So that's what I did. And about 2 to 3 years in, I saw a posting from another company, not exactly the same size as Van Bell, but Valleybrook Gardens is the company, and Valleybrook Gardens grows perennials. In fact, it was one of my horticultural heroes worked for Valleybrook Gardens, a guy named John Schroeder, who started the company, and he really was a master of branding his products. He put all of his perennials into a blue pot, and he called them heritage perennials. He was the first guy to register perennials.com, which is the website of the company, and he still thinks that was one of his better business decisions, because that one hits searches very highly when people search for perennials. So for me, this was a dream job. I went in for the interview, and with the combination of what horticulture education I'd had at the time, which was I was about 3 years into a 2-year program, because I was taking it part-time, they offered me the position. And so I had to consider this. I had to think about it, because what they offered me was a massive pay cut. And I want to be straight about this, is that if you're considering the kind of career move that I'm making here, that sort of abrupt move into an industry that you don't have any experience in, that you're probably going to get a bit of a downgrade in your pay, and that's what I did. So I went from earning a living to barely earning a living, and I knew that it would be difficult work, and so the consideration was, well, what are my opportunities? Because I'm getting older, everybody gets older. I'm going to be less capable of the physical work at some point or another. So that was really my thinking, was I better jump on this right now. I have to say one other side note to this, because I'm about to wrap up the section of how I took on, or how I transitioned over to horticulture, is that simultaneously to our search for a job, or my search for a job in horticulture, one other concept I was toying with was, what if I started my own business? What if I started my own farm, grew some plants? I was kind of into roses, so that was one of the considerations, was, could I, sort of sidestep the going into the industry and starting at the bottom and make my own business. But making that work was going to be a thing, and the first thing I needed was a piece of land. The first thing I needed was a place to do it, because my backyard wasn't really cutting it. So I actually found a place, and the timing just sucked. The timing was, I'm going to bring a picture up here. This is the location of the farm. Beautiful mountains in the background. This is on Nikomin Island. Beautiful, heavy soil, great for growing roses, lush almost all the time, no problem with water. And as I say, the setting is just glorious. So that came up just shortly after I made the transition. So the timing sucked. I was about a year into this massive pay cut, and just trying to figure out if this job could work for me, because it was a physically hard job. And then that came on the market, and ultimately we decided to, I had some savings, we took the equity from our old house, and we bought the farm, right? So that was probably not the most financially wise thing to do, but we knew it was the right property, and we didn't know when a small acreage close enough to the urban areas of the Fraser Valley or Lower Mainland would become available again. So we jumped for it. So ultimately, it's taken a lot of work to get it to the stage you see in the picture here, but that was our difficult decision, our dilemma, after I took the job. All right, I'm going to take another little quick look at the comments and just see if there's anybody else who had something to add to the topic. Yeah, Anita, you have questions about how to get going starting succulents, and I think probably I'm going to treat that as a separate topic here. Just incidentally, the company I work for, Valleybrook Gardens, has changed a little bit over time, and maybe I'll go into that section in the how it all worked out section, the 10 years later update. But they've actually taken on a big amount of succulents business, and succulents is an interesting business because everybody's gotten into it all at once. So my only piece of advice off the cuff would be that you've got to distinguish or have a way to market your succulents that makes them look quite different than what everybody else is offering. Taking 2 or 3 different colors that pair well together and putting them into a combination planter, spending a little time thinking about what that planter should look like, that can really distinguish you between all the other succulents that are coming on the market right now, because pretty much everybody and their dog suddenly is in the tropicals and succulents business, because those are quite hot horticultural topics. So I'm going to go on to the section now where I talk about how it all worked out for me, that 10-year transition, and what it meant for my life. So 10 years in, and the job I do for Valleybrook has evolved. So when I first started there, really I just started as a basic supervisor. So I was helping to load plants, helping to move plants, handling the plants physically as they were shipping out, and supervising a small crew of guys. And really anything that required hard physical work and a little bit of logistical know-how is what they put me onto at first. And later on, I got a chance to start working in the potting department early in the season so that we could get plants into pots. I also took a hand in the facilities and maintenance department of that nursery. So really it was a point of me deciding that I wanted to be very useful to this employer before, as a leap of faith, almost before they compensated me for those things. So I would find a way to be useful to them. I would work doubly hard and hope that the opportunity would come afterwards. I guess my thought was that if I work as hard as I can and add as much value as I can, that if they didn't respond to that within a couple of years and give me new opportunities, that I would have to move on. That was my sort of strategy there. And happily, for every bit of effort that I put in, they noticed, and they were able to move me forward or advance me, particularly in the direction that I wanted to go. So eventually I became the grower of the nursery. So I'm the grower now, handling the perennials, annuals, herbs and veggie starts. I supervise the repair and maintenance department still, and I handle the pest and disease control on the nursery. So that's how far I've advanced in 10 years. So a big increase in my duties, also a big increase in pay. So I'm finally at a point now, 10 years in, that I'm making as much money as I was when I left retail. Second update I'll say is I've learned so much. You know, when you go in, you don't know quite what to expect in the industry, and I've learned a ton. I've learned a ton about greenhouses and the nursery business. I've learned a ton about how to grow plants. So everything that I've learned there, I've been able to apply directly to my business here, which I've been sort of simultaneously working on, the Rose Farm, but I've also been able to bring it to the YouTube channel here. So that's been the side benefit of all the knowledge I'm getting working on this nursery. The business itself has changed a lot over time. Like I say, there's now this whole other division which handles succulents, and boy, is it growing fast. It's a really trending topic, so they've taken it on in a big way and have made some big inroads with some of the big US retailers. So we've also picked up big box contracts on the perennials end of the business as well. So we've definitely grown a lot, and the company is growing really, really quickly. And all those opportunities to pick up more responsibilities, they're there. I'm just at the point where my cup is full. I can't do much more on the business. And on the side of Fraser Valley Rose Farm, what I do here, I've also seen rapid growth, but it's a bit constrained. It's substantial growth, but it's constrained by the fact that I basically have to do the selling of my roses and even the plant care and propagation work. I do it on evenings and weekends when I'm not working at the main nursery. And the main nursery is very, very busy, as you could imagine, through the spring and summer season. So it really is constrained by the day job, and the more that I take on at Valleybrook, because that's my bread and butter, the less time I have for my own business. And frankly, those competing demands between my day job and my side hustle, it's something that is going to have to be resolved at some point. I'm either going to have to start taking days off there, or getting some time off there, reducing my responsibilities so that I can grow the Rose Farm, or I sideline the Rose Farms for some time until I get a bit older and have more time to do this. I don't know quite what the result of that debate is right now. So that covers the main portion of my topic here, and once again, I want to apologize for the technical problems at the beginning there. The YouTube live server wasn't working for me through the new studio, so I had to, because this is my first time doing it, I had to go back through the classic view and figure out how to use that part of the studio. So that was a bit frustrating for me. But I did want to take a second to ask if there are people out there who have questions or comments on this topic. If you view this live, or you're viewing this live now, definitely go ahead and throw it into the live stream comments, which I think are to your right of me in the screen. But also, if you watch this later and you have your own recounting of how you changed careers dramatically or abruptly in your life, feel free to leave the comment there. I guess the other thing I wanted to say is right now, I'm first going to check and see if there's any comments that anybody has there. And I don't see anything else right now, so I'll just say, or I'll talk about a little more about one quick thing, which is that there's 3 basic paths to getting into growing plants for a living, and I've tried 2 of them. One of them is to get an education and then get the job, and hopefully the job is something substantial enough that it can pay you. The second one is to start your own business, and those 2 I can talk about. The third one is to start from the bottom, is to get into it right away, get the experience instead of the education, and see if you can distinguish yourself. And I think I would give the same advice on that one as I said I took the approach myself when I took the job at Valleybrook, which is you can't really wait for the employer to notice something good in you or to be fair with you in return. You kind of have to put your foot forward. You have to be the one who decides, I'm going to put in a ton of effort now, I'm going to show what I've got, I'm going to take a leap of faith and work harder for them than maybe they have any right to expect. And at the end of that process, if in the course of 2 or 3 years they're not offering you what you need, if they're not offering you full-time hours or year-round employment, or not offering you any advancement or any new job responsibilities, then you have to be ready to walk away and go to something else. And that would be my only advice for somebody who doesn't go to school, doesn't try to start their own business, but is just trying to break into the business, I guess, out of the blue, just from the entry level of the job. All right, I think that's it for me today. I'm going to check one more time and see if there's any other questions. Thank you for the encouragement. Thank you everybody for showing up today. I really appreciate it. And I'll sign off right there. Thanks so much.